Number 8. Japanese Super Sub. In March 2005, on a seabed off Hawaii, a Japanese submarine designed to carry bombers to strike U.S. coastal cities during World War II was spotted by a team from the National Atmospheric Administration. But it took them another 4 years to find the I-401's sister vessel, the I-201. The subs were officially captured by the U.S. Navy in 1945, when Japan surrendered in the war, but they were deliberately sunk the next year when demands were made by the Soviet Union to get access to them. The U.S. did this since they'd learned enough information from the submarines and didn't want the technological secrets they'd obtained to fall into the Soviets' hands, America's former ally. Japan became aware of its shortcomings in surface ships as the war went on, and because of this, they decided to concentrate most of their efforts on their submersible vessels, subsequently creating these underwater aircraft carriers. Each was capable of carrying a 1,700-pound bomb. 3 Aichi light bombers could also be stowed on the deck in a hangar, and a catapult would then be used to launch them. The Japanese planned to use the superior I-201, which would reach the water surface, ready, and launch aircraft within a few short minutes, to fling plague-riddled rats and insects carrying dengue fever, cholera, and typhus at their enemies. But because the bacteriological weapons weren't ready in time, they instead switched their target to the Panama Canal. Before the attack could be fully carried out, though, Japan decided to surrender. Number 7. Sunken Treasure. In 1985, on July 20th, the legendary deep-sea explorer Mel Fisher saw the shipwreck of the Nuestra Senora de Atocha. The galleon sank while on its way to Spain from the New World, when it was suddenly hit by a devastating hurricane centuries ago in 1622. As a result of the accident, 260 people were killed. Miraculously, 5 children survived the incident by climbing up the ship's aft mast, which stayed above the water's surface. At the time of her sinking, the Senora de Atocha was loaded with large amounts of precious cargo. But what really makes this ship incredible is that it contained about 40 tons of silver and gold and about 70 pounds of Colombian emeralds, some of the world's most expensive and finest jewels in the world. Initially, Spanish treasure hunters tried and failed to recover these valuable goods because the Atocha's hatches were sealed tight. Then, a second hurricane destroyed the shipwreck even more, and it was eventually lost without a trace. Over 300 years later, it was finally discovered by Mel Fisher. The search was dangerous and long, as Fisher had first started looking for the vessel back in 1969. But a few finds over the years led him closer and closer to the ship's resting place. In 1973, his team found a few silver bars along the seafloor, and their tally marks matched Senora de Atocha's paperwork. Then, 2 years later, they located 5 of the galleon's cannons, and before they found the Atocha herself, they stumbled upon the vessel's sister ship, the Santa Margarita. Finally, though, Fisher found his target off the Florida Keys. The ship's cargo was estimated to be worth somewhere around $400 million. It included 125 gold bars and discs, 1,200 pounds of silverware, and 24 tons of silver bullion, coins, and ingots. On top of these items, several artifacts of great importance were recovered as well, like navigational instruments, Native American relics, and 20 remarkably preserved cannons. And this is why in 2014, the Nuestra Senora de Atocha was named the most valuable shipwreck in the world by the Guinness World Record Association. Number 6. Train Graveyard. An eerie train graveyard was found by archaeologists off the coast of New Jersey after a boat captain identified the engines during a surveying trip at the bottom of the ocean with a manometer in 1985. Here, under 90 or so feet of water, they found 2 rare preserved Planet-class 222T models that were dated way back to the 1850s. Strangely enough, it's still a mystery as to how the steam engines came to rest on the ocean floor. There's apparently no historical record of them ever being built, and nothing about them being lost either. but explorers think the engines may have disappeared during a brutal storm that happened about 5 miles off the coast of Long Branch, New Jersey, while they were being transported to the mid-Atlantic from Boston. Experts say the trains possibly fell off the barge or were deliberately pushed off to prevent the ship from slipping underneath the waves in rough waters. Even though the locomotives are crusted over in 160 years worth of rust, they were found surprisingly well preserved. One plan for recovering them that was under consideration involved pulling both trains to the surface for restoration. Each one was a fully loaded 15-ton locomotive, during a time when steam engines were typically only being produced at 35 tons. The New Jersey Museum of Transportation is now trying to decide what the best course of action will be for these historic steam engines. Number 5. Fine wine. You may stumble upon some unexpected treasure if you decide to dive deep down into the waters off northern Spain's coast. Wine is considered a delicacy in many regions of the world, but did you know that in the Bay of Biscay, you can find this alcoholic beverage at the bottom of the sea? According to Crusoe Treasure Underwater Winery, the wildlife and salty waters along the seafloor give wine a distinctly unique flavor. This pioneering idea to age the drink is the brainchild of the winery's founder, Borja Saracho. The man started the deep-sea aging project after noticing that many wine bottles taken from shipwrecks were sold at auction for high prices. So in 2010, he decided to explore this idea and began researching if the ocean could actually change wine for the better. And according to him, the results were beyond exciting. After his experiments, Saracho and his team noticed that experts who traveled to the town of Palencia, Spain every 3 months preferred the sunken sample after testing his water wine against those they'd aged on land. Apparently, the deep-sea aged wine changed its color a bit, turning from red to violet and from white to a greenish hue. And in the nose, they had a much different aroma, and they were really soft. Saracho's trailblazing research eventually turned into an all-out commercial venture. The winery is now located in the Bay of Palencia, not far from northern Spain's coast, in a dark and cool area 65 feet below the Atlantic Ocean. The facility ages red wines for 12 to 15 months, while they age white wine for only 6 months at sea. So far, Crusoe Treasure has produced 10 unique wines for their customers to enjoy. Would you ever try wine that's been aged down in the ocean? Let us know in the comments below. And while you're at it, hit that subscribe button. Now, on to the next one. Number 4. The Silfra fissure. Between the Eurasian and North American plates lies the divergent tectonic boundary called the Silfra fissure. It's a rift that formed in the mid-Atlantic ridge, which is located in the Thingvellir National Park in Iceland. The valley and Silfra itself were built by the divergent tectonic drift of the North American and Eurasian tectonic plates. They drift about 2 centimeters farther apart each year, building up tremendous tension between the earth above and the plates themselves. This tension is only relieved through semi-frequent earthquakes that happen approximately every 10 years. When this takes place, it causes fissures and cracks to form in Thingvellir Valley. Silfra is situated at the edge of Thingvallatten Lake and is one of the largest of these fissures. Silfra intercepts a major aquifer, preventing it from feeding multiple springs at its base below. Rocks and boulders that have fallen into the ever-widening fissure have even formed caves within the cracks. The fissure is actually pretty popular with snorkelers and scuba divers because of its location and clear waters. It reaches a maximum depth of 207 feet and extends over 300 feet. The fissure can be controllably dived by experienced divers using a dry suit. Although marine life is scarce in the fissure's extremely cold temperatures, which are typically between 2 and 4 degrees Celsius, there are still some creatures that call it home. For example, a species of amphipod called Crimostygus thingvellensis can only be found within Thingvellir Lake and its surrounding areas. But the only fish that inhabits Silfra year-round is a subspecies of the Arctic char called the dwarf char. This fish is rarely ever seen, thanks to the fact that it lives within the deepest recesses of the fissure. Number 3. West Mata Volcano. In 2009, scientists supported by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA, and the National Science Foundation recorded the deepest erupting volcano that's ever been seen. It's been named the West Mata volcano, and it's located in an area near Tonga, Samoa, and Fiji, about 4,000 feet beneath the Pacific Ocean. According to Joseph Riesing, the expedition's chief scientist and a chemical oceanographer with the University of Washington, the team found a kind of lava that had never been seen before erupting from the volcano. And for the first time ever, they observed molten lava flowing across the floor of the ocean. Co-chief scientist Bob Embley described the discovery as an underwater 4th of July, resembling a fireworks display. On December 17, 2009, the scientists revealed the video they'd taken of the eruption and discussed the observations they made at the American Geophysical Union's annual fall meeting in San Francisco. According to Riesing and Embley's team, the West Mata volcano produced bonanite lava, which is currently believed to be one of the hottest forms of lava on Earth. This type of magma was only previously seen on extinct volcanoes from over 1 million years ago. Number 2. Zombie worms. There's a creature that lives in the deepest recesses of the ocean and is capable of consuming the bones of massive aquatic animals. It's not exactly a giant of the sea, but instead a small annelid or worm. It's called the Osedax worm, and they're known to feast on the carcasses of ocean creatures like whales, and according to scientists, even marine dinosaurs like mosasaurs and plesiosaurs. Apparently, these so-called zombie worms have been eating off bones for over 66 million years. The Osedax worm was first discovered in 2002. When a whale dies in the open ocean, its corpse will eventually sink down to the bottom of the seafloor, about a half-mile from the surface. This event is a much sought-after buffet for deep-sea inhabitants like sleeper sharks, giant isopods, and hagfish. This list now also includes the rarely seen Osedax worm. Amazingly, just one whale carcass can sustain an entire colony of zombie worms for decades, since the cold temperatures in this region of the ocean slows down decomposition tremendously. This is also due to the fact that most predators and scavengers can't reach this depth, leaving ample food for the worms. Oddly enough, they don't have a stomach or a mouth, and their survival depends solely on the bones of the dead. The zombie worms feed by slowly dissolving the bones with acid secreted from their bodies. The meal's collagen and fat is then broken down further into nutrients that the worms can actually absorb by a series of tendrils colonized by bacteria. And at number 1, chemical weapons. After World War II ended in 1945, military forces around the world were left with a huge problem: what to do with the massive arsenals of chemical weapons no longer required. In the end, the United Kingdom, the US, and Russia opted for what seemed to be the cheapest and safest method of disposal available to them: dumping everything into the ocean. And so, troops were ordered to load ships with tons of chemical munitions, sometimes encased in artillery shells or bombs. Afterward, they shoved containers of these toxic chemicals overboard, or they sank the vessels completely, leaving behind inaccurate records of the amounts and locations the items were dumped. Experts believe that there's around 1 million tons of chemical weapons littered across the ocean floor, from Bari Harbor in Italy, where a whopping 230 sulfur mustard exposure cases have been recorded since 1946, to the east coast of the US, where in the past 12 years, sulfur mustard bombs have shown up on 3 separate times in Delaware. This issue isn't just regional, it's a global problem. According to Terence Long from the International Dialogue of Underwater Munitions, or IDUM, a Dutch-based foundation from the Netherlands. It's now become a race against the clock for scientists who are looking for any signs of environmental damage, since the bombs rusting on the sea floor are potentially leaking their deadly payloads into the ocean every single day. And as big corporations drill for gas and oil in the ocean floor, install wind turbines on the surface, and the fishing vessels of the world trawl for deep-diving fish, the scientific pursuit to find and properly handle these chemical weapons has only become more important with each passing day. Number 10. Japanese ghost ships. 24 ships sank during the Battle of Iwo Jima, one of the deadliest conflicts in the U.S. Marines' history and one of World War II's most dramatic battles. After multiple earthquakes near one of Japan's most deadly volcanoes, Mount Suribachi, the ships have risen from the ocean's bottom. 24 Japanese cargo ships that were seized by the United States Navy during the final stages of the war were captured via satellite images from Japan's All Nippon News. Thanks to Mount Suribachi's seismic activity, the seafloor has begun to rise. Since the island at the time lacked the necessary facilities, the boats were transported to the western section of Iwo Jima to create a port. The sunken ships are now resting on top of volcanic ash after the eruption. To safeguard other ships that were unloading troops and materials, they were repurposed as a barrier. On invasion maps, the island was called Brown Beach. It's believed that this was done to establish a false naval base for supporting a U.S. military base before the invasion of mainland Japan. While the Japanese military has retained control of the island since 1968, there are no people currently living on Iwo Jima. It is clear from the surrounding areas that the sea's discoloration has expanded and that the volcanic activity is still strong, according to Setsuya Nakada, director of the government's Volcano Research Promotion Center. Let's be honest, who would want to live near an active volcano? Number 9. Ancient city in India. Off the shore of a historic pilgrimage destination, a tsunami revealed what looked like an ancient city and portions of a temple, which archaeologists excavated underwater. In Mahabalipuram, a seaside town that was severely damaged by a tsunami on December 26, 2004, 3 stone structures with intricate animal sculptures have been uncovered. Sand layers that buried the buildings, which seemed to be from the 7th century, were dislodged by the power of the falling waves. Thousands of Hindu pilgrims visit Mahabalipuram every year to see its beautifully carved shore temples, which have already earned the city international recognition as a World Heritage Site. 7 pagodas were located as well, 6 of which were drowned by the sea, according to reports by old British travel writers. A reclining lion is even carved on another building that the tsunami revealed. Also, an elephant and a horse in flight are some of the 6-foot-tall granite masterpieces. A godlike figure is even carved into a little square nook over the elephant's head. Throughout the 7th and 8th centuries during the Pallava period, lions, elephants, and peacocks were often used to embellish buildings and temples, according to archaeologists. This explains the intricate carvings. Number 8. A World War II bomb. The record-breaking temperatures and burnt fields caused by 2022's heat waves in Europe were followed by the discovery of a World War II bomb that was hidden by the drought-stricken River Po in Italy. The 1,000-pound bomb was found on July 25, 2022 near the northern town of Borgo Vergilio and was defused and put under controlled detonation 1 weekend later by military experts. According to the army, about 3,000 nearby residents had to leave their homes in order to prepare for the disposal of the bomb. The U.S.-made weapon, which the army claimed had 530 pounds of explosives, had its fuse removed by bomb disposal experts. The device was then transported by the bomb squad and detonated in a quarry in the neighboring municipality of Medole, about 30 miles away, through the help of the police. The Po, which is the longest river in Italy, was under a state of emergency at the time during the worst drought in 70 years. Number 7. A 1960s plane crash. Authorities discovered what they thought was the wreckage of a 1960s plane accident when a severe drought in California dried up lakes around the state. A decades-old mystery may have been solved thanks to the June 2021 discovery. The aircraft resembles the Piper Comanche 250, which disappeared over 50 years ago on January 1, 1965. The plane wasn't damaged at all and was spotted in a deep spot by a company testing equipment for underwater surveys in Folsom Lake, close to Sacramento. All 4 passengers, along with the pilot, died in the accident. Despite ongoing search attempts up until 2014, only the pilot's body was located. The 3 passengers' remains were never found. First detected on sonar equipment, the plane was discovered by the survey company Seafloor Systems. They captured detailed pictures of the aircraft's tail and propeller thanks to the lake's record low water level. According to CBS Sacramento, Frank Wilcox, whose brother was on the plane decades ago, searched for the aircraft and his brother's remains up until his death just 2 years ago. The discovery of the plane can now bring some peace to the grieving relatives of those killed. Number 6. An ancient temple. A buried temple that had been hidden inside a pyramid was discovered by archaeologists after an earthquake in Mexico. After an 8.1 magnitude earthquake slammed central Mexico, a 7.1 magnitude earthquake shook the region again on September 19, 2017. A pyramid at the Teopanzolco archaeological site about 43 miles south of Mexico City was damaged by the earthquake and killed over 200 people. An even more ancient temple was located inside the 13th century pyramid when researchers at the site used radar to assess the damage. The once hidden ruin is likely to be over 800 years old. An incense burner and pottery shards were also found inside the temple, which was about 20 feet long by 13 feet wide. According to researchers with Mexico's National Institute of Anthropology and History, the site was presumably built in 1150 by Aztecs of Toluca culture. 2 known temples in the pyramid were affected by the earthquake's partial collapse. One was devoted to the Aztec rain deity Tlaloc, and the other was for the god of war Huitzilopochtli. The stability of Tlaloc and Huitzilopochtli temples was put in jeopardy when the earthquake caused the floor between them to bend and ultimately sink. The secret temple was located around 6.5 feet below the Earth's surface. It was very similar to the other temples in the pyramid. Like the others, it had stucco walls, a bench, facade built from long stones, and the remains of a pillar that once supported the temple's roof. The Teopanzolco site is crucial for remembering the history of ancient cultures in Mexico, since the secret temple is the earliest structure in the entire pyramid. Number 5. An Iron Age skeleton. Archaeologists believe that 2,000-year-old human remains were discovered after a series of storms struck Scotland's Shetland Islands during the 2012 holiday season. The ancient skeleton seemed comparable with nearby Iron Age sites, according to local archaeologist Chris Dyer. Evidence of 1 or maybe 2 more burials was seen at the location, but the finding was covered up after another storm forced part of a cliff to collapse. In addition to the Iron Age ruins being hidden, the initial grave is now covered by tons of debris. Human history is often found in nature. In the distant depths of a limestone cave system that has degraded through time, for instance, the bones of 2 humanoids, a young male and an adult female, who lived over 2 million years ago, were located. The Canadian high Arctic mountains also reveal a wealth of old hunting gear as sections of ice that had been there for thousands of years have began thawing out. Officials stated that a small fragment of bone was discovered and will be tested using radiocarbon dating to determine the skeleton's approximate age, but they don't plan to do any more excavation work at the site in light of this discovery. Number 4. Prehistoric forest. The violent storms that swept thousands of tons of sand off beaches in Cardigan Bay revealed a prehistoric forest, an unsettling scene that features the stumps of hundreds of oak trees that died over 4,500 years ago. Before getting submerged under layers of sand and salt water thanks to climate change and rising sea levels, the forest of Borth originally covered vast areas of swampy terrain in Wales. According to locals, Cantrair Gwaelod, a now vanished kingdom, perished beneath the seas as a result of the skeleton trees. When the water level increased 4,500 and 6,000 years ago, the trees stopped growing altogether. A sizable portion of the missing woodland was seen again in 2014. Archaeologists also discovered a nearby timber boardwalk at the beginning of that year, which was made visible by the storms. It was built when the local population learned to adapt to life in an increasingly wet environment, and its age is estimated to be between 3,100 and 4,000 years old. Footprints of people and animals, as well as charred stones from old hearths, were found in 2012 in the peat's solidified top layer. The stunning prehistoric terrain was recently exposed, demonstrating how the coast is constantly stripped naked by storms and flood tides. A $14.1 million coastal defense system was launched in 2012 to safeguard the site. Number 3. Book of Esther Scrolls. An ancient book of Esther scroll was discovered by a group of Zaka, volunteer emergency response teams, after they combed through the wreckage of Antakya, Turkey, after a recent tragic earthquake. This discovery was more than the volunteers ever thought they would find. The books, which are from the third section of the Hebrew Bible, have special significance to the Jewish community. Major Chaim Otmanskin, leader of the Zaka search and rescue team, was contacted by the man who found the scrolls with a unique request. Because of their close proximity to Syria and the terrible death of their community's last leader, he expressed his concern for the scrolls ending up in the wrong hands. He requested that they be protected and that their community be remembered. Major Otmanskin was touched by the man's desperate plea, and he agreed to protect the scrolls. The Zaka volunteer said, "I'm truly honored to save such a significant historical document and to make sure that the heritage of Antakia's Jewish community remains intact even after the quake reduced it to nearly nothing." On February 15, 2023, after working tirelessly for days to save lives under difficult circumstances, the Israeli expedition successfully went home. The chairman of Antakia's Jewish community, Saul Senudioglu, and his wife, Fortuna, were among the many bodies that the Israeli rescuers found after the earthquake, in addition to over 24 survivors who were pulled from the wreckage by the rescuers. Number 2. Native American Artifacts. In September 2017, Hurricane Irma toppled down trees on a Native American preserve on Marco Island in South Florida, leading to the discovery of hundreds of ancient artifacts. The Calusa tribe, which no longer exists, inhabited the island between 700 and 1200 AD. They previously owned the objects, although public property cannot be dug up without the consent of government officials. Archaeologists have theorized for a while that the region contained a treasure trove of relics. The researchers have since taken 200 artifacts from the preserve, including tools, glass, ceramics, and shells, after they were naturally uncovered. The Marco Island Historical Museum eagerly accepted the new discoveries. There, they were examined and put on display, or in some cases, sent to other museums around the country. The dig has sparked a debate over how Native American artifacts have been handled in modern times, and some tribe leaders have expressed their displeasure. In the neighboring Everglades, Betty Osceola of the Miccosukee tribe is worried that disturbing anything from their natural resting place could be upsetting to the spirits of deceased tribe members. But researchers say that they are being as respectful as humanly possible and aren't being intrusive at all. They also claim that there is so much that can be learned from the artifacts that it outweighs the cons. The Marco Island History Museum's curator made the point that keeping the items may help teach crucial lessons about the Calusa way of life, including how to live sustainably on land. Number 1. A wooden shipwreck. An antique sailing ship's wreckage was spotted on a beach in Alabama after Hurricane Isaac, raising concerns about the ship's origin and the day it sank. Normally, sand covers the debris, but sometimes beach erosion brought on by strong storms reveals portions of the ship's hull. The wreckage was originally made public in 1969 after Hurricane Camille, then again in 2004 following Hurricane Ivan, and a third time in 2008 thanks to Hurricane Ike. Isaac uncovered more of the ship than ever before, drawing large crowds of people to the coast to see the historical wonder. According to local historians, there is no mystery surrounding the ship's history. The vessel is the Rachel, a schooner built in Tuscaloosa, Mississippi during World War I. The ship met a devastating storm in 1923 when sailing for the first time with limited supplies and an 8-person crew. She ran aground and was wrecked despite the crew's efforts to salvage her and lower an anchor. The boat was burned after salvaging the little cargo on board. The Rachel was built to be a timber schooner, but capsized during the Prohibition era when alcohol was banned. She was allegedly carrying illegal alcohol, according to several rumors. This has not been verified, and no one could know what goods she was actually transporting. So the mystery of what she was carrying remains.
7. Imperial German High Seas Fleet. The Orkney Islands are home to a wind-sheltered natural harbour known as Scapa Flow. Throughout both World Wars, the Royal Navy utilized the port as a naval station. Germany was ordered to hand over all of her warships in November 1918, just a few days after the armistice. The German Imperial Navy arrived at Scapa Flow with a fleet of about 250 ships, including 74 battleships. All German vessels had to be turned over to the Allies in accordance with the Treaty of Versailles provisions. In order to prevent World War I enemies like the British and the French from seizing control of the fleet, Vice Admiral Ludwig von Reuter made the decision to scuttle the Armada in June 1919, and within hours, just about every one of the 74 German ships was intentionally submerged beneath the waves. It was crucial to get rid of the wrecks that immediately threatened passage because of the Royal Navy's strategic importance of their Scapa Flow base. The rights to utilize the wrecks were purchased by the business Cox and Danks, which then began the salvage effort. Despite several failures, the business was able to raise and salvage 32 ships, thanks to their advanced methods. In 1936, a different business took over, and several other ships were rescued over time. 7 boats, measuring between 492 and 591 feet, are still submerged and will remain in their final resting place at Scapa Flow for good. 6. Native American Burial Ground. Officials from the state of Florida announced on February 28, 2018, that a 7,000-year-old Native American burial site had been uncovered off the coast of Venice in the Gulf of Mexico. When it was first built, it wasn't at the bottom of the sea, prior to the Florida shoreline shifting as sea levels rose thousands of years ago. The nearshore burial site was an inland freshwater pond with a floor composed of peat. Since its discovery, officials have emphasized that they're working hard to maintain the site. Divers and other interested parties are forbidden from disrupting the burial ground out of respect for the prehistoric people buried there and their current descendants. Excavation and/or removal of any materials or human remains from the site is also prohibited under Florida law, since the area is protected. According to a statement released by the Florida Department of State's Bureau of Archaeological Research, divers initially uncovered possible human bone fragments at the location in June 2016 and submitted the discovery to state archaeologists for further investigation. The pond's peat-lined bottom, which remained intact long after it was submerged by the Gulf of Mexico, is where archaeologists think the ancestors of native Floridians interred their dead. Peat has a tendency to retain biological matter, including human remains. The so-called bog bodies have been found in ancient peat bogs all across the world, and at times have been found impressively preserved, even after thousands of years. 5. Fossilized shark teeth. In the Indian Ocean, a graveyard containing hundreds of shark teeth is hidden about 3.5 miles below the surface. On board the RV Investigator, a research vessel that measures 308 feet long, the discovery was made in October during a month-long expedition that was carried out along the southern tip of Indonesia. And the whole project was run by Australia's national science organisation called the Commonwealth Scientific and Industrial Research Organisation, CSIRO. In an effort to gather fish as part of an ongoing biodiversity assessment, the researchers dropped a trawling net into the deep water on the last day of the expedition after 26 previous attempts. But instead, they dredged up hundreds of shark teeth, enough to fill an entire net. At first, the researchers were a little upset because the net was filled with mud, so they assumed they didn't collect many fish specimens. However, they dug through the mud anyway and were thankful that they did. They discovered fossilized teeth from ancient sharks, including the direct ancestor of the enormous megalodon shark, in addition to teeth from current mako and great white sharks. Researchers gathered more than 750 teeth in total, which ranged in sizes from 0.39 inches to 4 inches, the latter being identified as belonging to a megalodon progenitor. As a result of the teeth spending so much time on the ocean floor, the researchers saw deposits of black manganese nodules developing on several of the teeth, but in every other respect, the teeth were all healthy. Since they don't believe that many sharks died there, researchers are unsure of why such a large number of teeth gathered in this area of the ocean. Sharks have an endless amount of teeth that are replaced like a production line, in contrast to humans, who only have one set of baby teeth at birth and one set of adult teeth throughout their lives. Ancient sharks most likely lived in a group where the teeth were located, which were discovered on a deep sea plain. According to experts, a shark colony formerly swam in and around this site, which was once a component of an old reef covered with seamounts. According to experts, it's possible that they lost their worn-out teeth as they swam, which would explain why so many of them were found in the same place. 4. H.L. Hunley. The H.L. Hunley was a Confederate submarine with an 8-person crew that was constructed out of 40 feet of bulletproof iron. But despite its reputation, it was a hazardous vessel to inhabit. However, it made history when it became the first submarine ever to sink an enemy vessel. Hunley sank 3 times in barely 8 months of service during the Civil War, from July 1863 to February 1864, killing roughly 30 men, including its creator, Horace Lawson Hunley. It was located twice, but marine and military historians have long been perplexed by the ship's final sinking, which occurred immediately after it fired a live torpedo into the USS Housatonic, a Union cruiser. Amazingly though, over 130 years after it went down, Hunley was discovered on the ocean floor in 1995. It was brought back to life 5 years later. All 8 crew members were unsettlingly seated at their respective workstations within the submarine, gathered around a massive hand crank that ran along its center. Numerous explanations have been proposed in order to try and understand why the ship sank and why the crew members didn't attempt to escape. Additional information has been found by researchers. The crew of the Hunley should have been able to leave the ship with the aid of a concealed fail-safe device in the keel, but it was never used. This implies that whatever sank the sub may not have been spotted by the crew. Michael Scafuri has spent 18 years conducting research on the sub. His team of experts discovered that the emergency levers were all locked in place after removing layers of corrosion, silt, and shells from the vessel, more proof that there wasn't much fear on board. The levers would have lifted the submarine to the surface and allowed the crew to swim to safety by releasing 1,000 pounds of so-called keel blocks. This find paved the way for 2 new theories. Either the crew was unaware that they were in danger, or they didn't anticipate the need to surface immediately. The Hunley was also tiny, so small that the soldiers weren't able to stand up with their backs straight. But regardless of its size, the crew still made no attempt to get away. That's why Duke University researchers speculated that they likely died rather quickly, quite possibly from the explosion of the submarine's own spar torpedo. According to doctoral student Rachel Lance, the pressure wave from the explosion was transported inside the submarine. She added that the explosion was big enough to kill the entire crew. In their 2017 research, experts built a scale replica of the submarine and detonated it in a pond. They were able to confirm a long-held theory by measuring the forces. Regardless of these developments, Scafuri has said it would still be some time before they could say with certainty what had taken place within the Hunley. He explained that he definitely wanted to get to that point, but he didn't guarantee it would be achievable. For the time being, scientists are concentrating on excavation, eliminating additional corrosion and underwater debris that have accumulated over the decades it sat on the ocean floor. If you were given the opportunity, would you join a diving team that works to excavate sunken ships? Let us know in the comments. And while you're at it, hit that subscribe button. 3. Deep sea desolation. Before a mechanical issue caused James Cameron to surface during his 2012 dive to the Challenger Deep, he made as many observations as he could. He shocked himself by realizing that he was basically alone down there. With the exception of the occasional inch-long prawn, he was the first person to ever see with his own eyes a depth of 35,576 feet beneath the ocean surface using a specially made submarine. There were no terrifying marine creatures, evolutionary miracles, or stunningly abrasive examples of nature's most basic beauty. James was the only one in his small metal ball, and him and the machine were alone in an underwater ghost town. The deepest part of the water, according to the man, is lunar, desolate and isolated, and he experienced total separation from all of mankind during the dive. Unfortunately, he was unable to collect samples since he had to cut his trip short due to mechanical issues. James Cameron, who still claimed that his effort was a major success, says that the Mariana Trench, which is bigger than the Grand Canyon and as deep as Mount Everest, will be explored over the course of several expeditions. 2. Nazi Silfra. A British-led crew has reached a record-breaking depth of 17,000 feet to retrieve a trove of silver coins worth $40 million. And apparently, they were originally on board a steamship that was sank by the Nazis. when a U-boat attacked the SS City of Cairo in 1942 when it was sailing from Bombay to London. It lost 100 tons of coins roughly 480 miles south of St. Helena. Given the difficulties salvage professionals faced, it was long believed that the cargo of the ship, which belonged to the UK Treasury, would be lost forever. But then, the UK Ministry of Transport hired the underwater company called Deep Ocean Search, DOS, comprised of 20 French oceanographers, to collect the coins from an extremely deep part of the ocean. The search submarine made a successful recovery on its first dive, according to Mava Onda, one of the oceanographers working on board the rescue vessel named S.V. John Lethbridge. When the robot produced coins bearing the royal stamp, the discovery was verified. The depths required to collect the majority of the trove, however, caused severe difficulties for the crew. A representative for DOS stated that the crew rapidly realized that working at this depth produced major technological challenges that had to be handled swiftly. And even though the recovery happened back in 2013, it wasn't made public until 2015. 1. Moon rocket engines. In 2012, Jeff Bezos, the creator and millionaire mogul who created Amazon.com, said on his Bezos Expeditions Venture Fund website that he'd personally funded and overseen an underwater excavation that had discovered portions of the massive F-1 rocket engines that were used by Apollo 11. The engines had been lit for approximately 150 seconds on July 16, 1969, in order to send Apollo 11's Saturn V launch vehicle to the moon. But after the launch went wildly wrong, they were located at around 14,000 feet below the surface of the Atlantic Ocean off the coast of Florida. Bezos intended to retrieve one or more of the engines for exhibition, and in 2013 he declared that parts from 4 F-1 engines had been hauled back to the surface after spending more than 40 years at the bottom of the ocean. It was hard to pinpoint precisely which flights the engines originated from, even though the Bezos Expedition website stated that several of the original serial numbers are missing or partially lost, likely to make mission identification problematic. It's possible that they're in fact from the Apollo 11's SIC stage. Each significant component of an F-1 engine had some type of serial number on it in order to be tracked through the production process. Each one that was flown was hand-built and manually assembled. It would be easy to identify which Apollo missions the recovered components originated from if the serial numbers on them could be decoded. A video depicting portions of the recovery procedure is available on the Bezos Expedition page. The engines are far beyond the reach of human divers, at a depth of about 3 miles or 2,000 feet deeper than the Titanic's remains. So, the operation was carried out using remote-operated vehicles, ROVs, that were controlled from the surface. The engines are absolutely enormous, measuring 19 feet from nozzle to fuel inlets, and weighing around 20,000 pounds. Because of this, it took a lot of skill to lift so much mass from the ocean floor, especially when the components had been corroded by seawater and had grown fragile. Rory Golden, the team's leader, previously collaborated with Dr. Robert Ballard to locate the Titanic, lending a lot of experience in the underwater exploration and salvage of the F-1 engines. The team found enough components to build 2 of these engines completely from scratch to combat the consequences of air exposure after being submerged in the ocean for so long. The parts must be restored and stabilized, but Bezos vowed that the rebuilt engines will be a centerpiece of a large museum-quality display. They wanted the hardware to reveal the entire truth, including the details of the 5,000-mile-per-hour re-entry and eventual collision with the ocean surface. And so, they were eager to put the equipment on display in the hopes it would inspire an audience. Because they've been broken apart and degraded, the engines, or rather the pieces of them, were placed next to another massive engine that's not in operation and serves as a reminder of how they appeared before they were launched. The 2 reconstructed F-1 engines, along with other NASA artifacts, are highlighted in Apollo, a new permanent display at the Museum of Flight that opened to the public on Saturday, May 20th, 2017. Do you think it's possible that there could be an advanced civilization living at the bottom of the ocean? Let us know your thoughts down below. And while you're at it, hit that subscribe button. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.